Hi, everybody. My name is Donald Stuckey. I am a former student at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, where I just received my master's degree in public administration and policy. Today's presentation is the result of several months of research on the Regional Transit Authority of Southeastern Michigan. It was part of a Capstone project that all of the students in the program have to complete. So this is my own research based off of a topic that I think is very important to the Southeastern Michigan region and to me personally, since I am a bus rider and have been using public transportation in Southeastern Michigan for almost 2 decades now. So let's get into it. So again, we are discussing the Regional Transit Authority of Southeastern Michigan, and we're evaluating its efficiency after a decade. So here is an outline of what we'll be talking about today. We're going to start with the purpose. I'm going to give you some the methodology behind the research and the collection of the data. I'm going to give you some considerations, which was based off a extensive literature review. I'm going to give you some background. We're going to discuss the findings through the analysis portion of this presentation. And we're going to discuss some recommendations, some possible recommendations. And obviously those recommendations will not be an exhaustive list, but they will be an area where anyone who's interested in this subject can start, and policymakers could use as a place to begin to look at making changes to our laws and operational processes. So let's talk about the methodology a little bit. This analysis is based off of quantitative data. We wanted to evaluate the efficiency. So we wanted to look at the quality of the service and the quality of what is being done in the RTA Southeastern Michigan. The data, we collected it through personal interviews, and we reviewed a wide variety of publicly available documents. Some of the people that we collected that data from were folks who are involved in the advocacy community. They are folks who have been in the space for many, many years, and folks who have also participated in research on similar subjects. This analysis is similar. It utilizes identical data collection methods from other similar analysis. So in our literature review, we found that a lot of those analyses utilize the review of public documents. They utilize personal interviews as a way to look at those transit authorities in other areas around the country. So the purpose. The RTA of Southeastern Michigan was established by PA 387 of 2012. After a decade of operation, we look to examine, we want to examine and identify the strengths and challenges of the RTA. So considerations, and again, this is based off of our exhaustive literature review, and there are 4 considerations that we want to look at. First off is governance structure, and on that we look at the ability to pull stakeholders together. That's something that we commonly see across many of the different uh, similar organizations across the country. Metropolitan planning authorities, as some research refers to them, they have this ability to pull together stakeholders, and that's something that's really important. The number of actors, the number of governments or officials that are involved in that region's planning authority. While the research does not give any type of specific number that's sufficient for good collaboration, good coordination, the number of actors does in fact play a role. So the research is pretty clear on that one. But there is not agreement among the research as to the number of actors that is ideal. Board composition and the selection method of those members, that's also something that's very important. There are a lot of different types of ways in which it's done. Some is through appointments, appointments of state officials. Some is appointment through local officials. Some have tried through election processes. Some have it where there are professionals involved who sits on these boards. Some have public officials, other politicians that sit on these boards. So there's a wide variety of way in which board composition is put together. And there are other things such as the makeup of the boards, whether how many people are in the urban setting, how many are in a suburban setting. Those things also have an effect on the ability of a regional transit authority or a metropolitan planning authority to be able to come to agreements and to be able to effectively plan. The role of the state. State governments play an important part. Many states have departments of transportation, and this would be right up their alley. But there are varying roles that states play in getting involved in these regional transit authorities. Some states are very involved. Some states not so much. So that's something else that has to be thought about. Powers of regional planning organizations. This is another consideration. Two types of authorities needed by regional transit planning bodies. There are two types of authorities that they're needed. First is they need the ability to raise revenue. And the other is they need to have the ability to integrate certain processes for planning and land usage. So these are those two specific powers: raising revenue and the ability to integrate planning and land use. That's something that we've seen commonly among a number of different regional planning authorities across the country. Other considerations is that we have public engagement characteristics. Public engagement is a critical component of any type of regional planning when it comes to regional transportation. Research has shown that there are some different characteristics. There are multiple methods of engagement, whether that's attending meetings, whether it's running different types of questionnaires and things of that nature. So there are multiple ways in which regional planning authorities should be engaging in engagement. We often see that there are local champions. There is a trusted person in the community that is a champion for that local transit. And that is something that is very, very important. Someone who has the political connections, someone who is trusted, someone who understands how to bring those relationships together. It has to be a focused outcome. Are people on the same page? Is there political leadership, which is also very important? Politics often gets is often a factor that gets in the way of that can be a concern in planning for regional transportation and the use of experts in visualization. People need to have an idea of what the system is going to look like and how it's going to operate. So obviously having maps and mock-ups of how that system is going to run is very important. And then having experts out in the community to talk about those things and to integrate ideas of community members are also things that are very, very important. Finally, there are types of regional coordination. There are several types that we see across many different many different authorities, planning organizations. Fair coordination, where there's a uniform way in which fair revenue is collected, because often many systems have many regional systems have where there are multiple providers. So there are, like here in Southeastern Michigan, obviously we have SMART, which is the suburban authority that services a lot of outer Wayne County. It services Macomb and Oakland counties. There's the ride in Ann Arbor. There's obviously the Detroit Department of Transportation, which services Detroit, and it also provides some service to surrounding communities. So there are a variety of different providers, transportation providers, and we'll get to that a little later in the analysis. But they have to have a way in which to collect fare in a way that is simple for the riders. Information coordination, just as important as fare coordination. Riders have to be able to find information on busing, on those transportation services, because it is very often that a person who is on the bus, who is taking public transportation, and if I interchange bus and transit, I mean both the same thing, but if people are catching public transportation, they're often utilizing multiple providers. And so being able to know how they connect with one another is very important. Facility and vehicle coordination is another important consideration. Again, this is where people are being able, where providers are able to utilize similar facilities for the pickup and drop off of their passengers, so they can transfer from one provider to the other. But then also being able to purchase certain items and certain other items that are needed for that system to work. So that could be vehicles, they could be the different things that you might see in a public transit vehicle. That could be security doors or fare boxes, the digital display boards, which we're starting to see show up on many DDOT and smart buses here in Southeastern Michigan. So that is also another point, a very important point of coordination. Service schedule coordination. This is very, very important. Being able to transfer from one system to the other. So this is really where it's important that those providers are talking to one another and saying, well, we have a bus that goes past this stopped where your bus drops off, having the time that people can be able having schedules coordinated in a way where people can be able to transfer from one provider to the other is very, very important. So service schedule coordination is very important. And joint agreements. Joint agreements simply makes the ability of providers to work together in a region to be those joint agreements allow them to be a whole lot more efficient and allows them to save taxpayer money through the use of joint agreements, whether those agreements are purchasing vehicles or utilizing other types of services. Maybe there's a service where um, you want to give your riders the ability to track where a bus is. Well, obviously a system like that costs money. So a joint agreement says, well, it's more efficient if we're all using the same one, and it's going to cost all of us the same amount of money. So it's not going to be expensive, and it's not going to be difficult for us to provide this to our riders. So those are the several types of regional coordination, which is an important consideration that we look at in this analysis. So let's talk about a background. Let's talk about some background of regional transit efforts here in Southeastern Michigan. So even though there's a much more in-depth history of this that goes even further back than the 1960s, I thought this would be a good place to start. So the first attempt is in 1967. The Michigan legislature passes PL 207 of 1967, and they created the Southeastern Michigan Transit Authority, which was later reorganized into SMART, or the Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation. Basically, this was an attempt by the region to absorb or to consolidate all of the different transportation providers in the area. Obviously, when they tried to absorb DDOT, or the Department of the Department of Rails or something like that, what they called it back then. The DRT is what they called it, Detroit Department of Rails, or Detroit Transit Rail, something like that. That effort fell through. So they weren't able to get that. They weren't able to consolidate DDOT, which is again the biggest provider of public transit in Southeastern Michigan. So that effort kind of failed back in the 60s. Fast forward to 2002, the legislature came together and passed the DARTA, Detroit Area Regional Transit Authority, and that was legislation that was introduced by, it was bipartisan legislation, actually passed both the House and the Senate that year, but it was vetoed by Governor England. It then failed to pass when Governor Granholm came into office. She supported the legislation, and the legislature failed to pass it in the next two sessions of the legislature. So after the failure of the first DARTA attempt, there was attempts by local actors, by local agencies, City of Detroit, other entities across the region to establish a DARTA type service. And so when they signed this agreement, they used state laws that allowed for governments to work together, to come together, and to provide services through joint agreements, through intergovernmental agreements, and so that was something that they tried to do. But there was a case filed against that agreement by the unions. Actually, I believe it was, they filed a case saying that that there was not authority, and they didn't have the kind of authority to enforce the Darden Agreement. Well, Michigan Court of Appeals agreed with Axne, and the court dismantled the agreement. In the Michigan Supreme Court did not even hear the case, so that attempt fell apart. Finally, in 2012, the legislature passed the RTA Act of the Regional Transit Act of 2012. This is PA 387 of 2012, and it created the RTA of Southeastern Michigan. So finally, after all of these attempts, we finally get a RTA, a regional planning authority in place after all of these different attempts. So let's take a look at the analysis. Start with governance, which is always one of the more tricky parts. So PA 387 provides a structure for stakeholder engagement, and they do this through two special committees that the legislation creates. The first is a Citizens Advisory Committee, and this is made up of bus riders, community organizations, and citizens from every jurisdiction within the region. So the RTA of Southeastern Michigan currently has Wayne County, including Detroit. It has Oakland County, Macomb County, and it has Washtenaw County, which is the U of M area, that'd be the Ann Arbor area. And representatives are able to be on the Citizens Advisory Council, and they meet quarterly to discuss things, and they send recommendations to the board of directors. And so there's pretty good engagement here from my analysis. From what I can see, they meet on a regular basis. There are questions that are asked based on things that are going on. Obviously, there have been questions. One of the more recent issues that we've seen is the shortage of drivers for DDOT. And so there has been a variety of questions on those. The RTA is looking at a new regional transit plan. Currently, as of the recording of this video, there is a new plan that they're putting in place. So there's questions that are being asked about that. And so that's these individuals are pretty engaging. And in my written paper on this analysis, I provide some key statements that were questions that were asked, and obviously there are video recording of these meetings and other documents that are available, and I'll try to leave some links in the video so that you can see for yourself. There is a providers advisory council, and so this provider advisory council is made up of the different public transit providers within the region. And so that would include, as I mentioned earlier, DDOT, SMART, the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority, and that is the ride that is known by, there's the Q line, that's the light rail trolley that goes down, the light rail system that goes down Woodward, And so they're considered a provider. There's the Detroit People Mover. There are some other providers that are also included. And at these meetings, based on the documents that we have been able to examine, they obviously provide recommendations to the board of directors, but they also give the providers an opportunity to talk about what they're doing internally. And so these kinds of discussions allow for providers to plan services and to discuss what they're doing and to encourage the further reach of public transit. And so this creates an environment for coordination, is being able to have these conversations, and be able to plan, being able to hear what their fellow providers are doing across the region. And so that seems to be a very good thing for there to be that kind of discussion that is going on a regular basis. And this structure that is created under PA 387 is a good structure that allows for that. So again, going further, another part is the RTA board. Now, PA 387 sets up the structure for the RTA board. The RTA board is made up of, again, as we mentioned, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw County. They all receive 2 representatives to the board. And they are appointed by the county executives for each of those counties. So the Wayne County executive would be able to appoint to Oakland County, Macomb, and Washtenaw. They are able to appoint 2 people. The city of Detroit gets 1 representative, and the mayor of Detroit has the ability to appoint that individual. The governor appoints the chair, which is a non-voting member. We'll come back to that later. So there have been numerous concerns raised about the political independence of the board. So what this does, one of the concerns is that instead of the board making decisions about regional transportation, the concern is that the board often waits for the county leaders and the Detroit mayor to make decisions about these different regional agreements when it comes to transportation. And so that's again another difficult. That's one of the concerns that are raised about the board. So there's this there seems to be a shadow committee basically that is making decisions, the kind of major decisions about regional transportation, instead of the board itself doing that. And so that's one of the concerns. And then there's the role of the state. And the state doesn't really have a direct role. The state of Michigan has an Office of Transit, Office of Passenger Transportation or Passenger Transit, something of that nature. And while they do some research and some other things, and that they simply don't, they're not really very active. Megan Owens, who is one of the people that I interviewed for this research, she described the role of the state as an administrator, something that documents and money passes through. So the state is really not very active in the RTA, other than, again, the appointment, the gubernatorial appointment of the chair of the RTA board, and the limited administrative role that the Michigan Department of Transportation plays. So not a very active role in the state. So there are the powers of the RTA, and here's a list of the different kinds of powers that they have. And you know, a lot of the things that you would expect, the issue to borrow money, issue bonds, apply for grants, collective bargaining, right away, acquire property, you know, millage proposal from ballot, you know, all of those kind of things. The issue comes is that there are limitations on being able to exercise those powers. Those heavy limitations are as follows. Funding proposals cannot even go to the voters without a supermajority of the board of the RTA board, and there has to be at least one person, at least one representative, including the city of Detroit, that has to vote in favor of that proposal before it can actually get on the ballot. So this effectively gives the each jurisdiction a veto over any kind of funding proposal before it can even go on the ballot. So you can see that that is a very significant limitation. So one of the main things that the RTA is there to do is to expand transit, is to better coordinate that transit. And in order to do that, there's this very high bar that they have to reach that's established in PA 387 in order for them to exercise it. And that is not even mentioning if it's going to be supported by the voters. Now, the only time that they have been able to get over this hurdle was in 2016. But as we know, when it got on the ballot, it failed at the ballot box. So the RTA board has been unsuccessful since 2016 at even putting something on the ballot for voters to vote on. Another limitation is building a rail system or acquiring a transit provider requires unanimous support of the RTA board. Now, there have been a lot of discussion over the years about having a rail system in Southeastern Michigan, similar to what it had back in the 1920s and the 1930s. And so in order for the RTA to support that, they would need to have unanimous support. Every single member of the board being able to support that before they could actually do that. PA 387 requires that any money raised by the RTA, that any jurisdiction must use at least 85% of those dollars used in the jurisdiction for public transit. So, so let's say, for example, that the 2016 vote was favorable, and we have this extra money for regional transit. So 85% of money that comes from voters in Oakland County has to be used in Oakland County. So from a public administration standpoint, that puts a very big limitation on the flexibility of those dollars, because transit just doesn't stay in one specific geographical area. If Woodward travels out of Oakland County, it travels out of Wayne County and into Oakland County. There are other locations from downtown that extend up into Macomb County that connect into Washtenaw County. So these are very severe limitations that are placed on the use of the RTA's powers. So we're seeing a very difficult ability of the RTA to exercise its powers that has been granted under PA 387. Public engagement. Public engagement is, by the folks that I've interviewed, they called it lackluster and sporadic. Basically, no plan exists. One of the primary reasons for that is because of limited funding. And going in deeper, examining some of the documents from the RTA, they have been very reliant on foundation support to fund some public engagement efforts. And so there's really a very difficult ability for the RTA to get its message out there and to gather the kind of community support, because they have no plan and they don't have a consistent funding to allow them to continue that public engagement efforts. Regional coordination. So this is one of the bright spots. One of the I think one of the more impressive parts of what the RTA is doing. We see multiple areas of coordination. We have fare coordination. DDOT and SMART, they have a common fare card system, which is known as DART. And you can see with the picture that there is a DART card 31 on there. That's a 31-day pass. And basically a person can utilize their app on their phone, or they can purchase it from multiple vendors throughout the region, and they can use that bus card to transfer from one provider to the other when they need to get from one place. So if you live in downtown Detroit and you have a meeting in Dearborn or in Westland, you can hop on a DDOT bus. You can then stop at Fairlane Mall and transfer over to a smart bus and use the same card and get to your appointment in Westland, basically. Same thing if you were headed out from downtown Detroit to Oakland County or to Macomb County, or from Oakland County to Macomb County. You have that ability to be able to get from one place to the other using just one fare system. And the prior system that they had is that you had to purchase if you were using a DDOT pass, you would swipe that DDOT pass, and then you would have to add an extra 50 cents or so to accommodate the difference. So you would have to use two cards. I remember using two cards when I needed to get on a smart bus. And so now that's gone, and there's just that one fare system now. We see more coordinated schedules and routes. Several years ago, there was the RTA put together what was called the Reflex Buses, and these were jointly operated by the RTA, by DDOT and SMART, and they were very popular to a point where DDOT, where SMART decided to take the concept and they created the fast buses. And because they created the fast buses, we've actually seen an increase in ridership in the region, because these fast buses are so convenient. One goes out to the airport, the other one goes up to Pontiac. So there is, and they ride through downtown. So this is a good example of fare coordination. Another good example of fare coordination that I can, schedule and route coordination is the Warren bus, the one that I catch, part of DDOT's Connect 10 buses. That bus used to stop right at the border of Detroit and Dearborn Heights. They've extended it to go straight down to Telegraph instead of stopping at the border. It goes straight down to Telegraph, and that gives you a connection to the smart buses in that area to get to different places. And so we're seeing that in all of the different cities that are surrounding the city of Detroit. Is that we're seeing that buses is that routes are better connecting with smart, and making sure that there are little to no gaps, and making sure that there are more transfers and connections to each provider. We can see that Smart has been looking into a program called the On Hands program, and it is a strategy for future coordination. And this is a pretty extensive strategy that they're putting together. And so we can see some of these elements in there and some of the new plans that they're trying to come out with. And so we can see that there is a future for what they're trying to do, which is also very important. So we're seeing multiple areas of coordination exist, and these are just some of the examples of how that coordination is working. And so, even other areas, joint agreements, vehicle and vehicle coordination. We're seeing a lot of those things. Megan Owens, she also talked about how during the height of the pandemic in 2020, DDOT and SMART were constantly talking to one another on how they could better work together. I can tell you one of the things that I've seen being a bus rider is that when Detroit started to install the security doors for their drivers on the buses, we started to see those appear on the smart buses as well. It was a few months between the two, but we started to see those on the buses. When we started to see digital signage appear on smart buses, some DDOT buses are starting to see those appear. Smart has the ability to live track the bus. DDOT has this ability now as well. So we're seeing a lot of good coordination between DDOT and SMART, and the RTA has played a role in a lot of these things happening. Fair coordination, for example, before DART was adopted, the RTA provided a lot of research and a lot of data to help put together that system. And we can just see how they're strategizing and trying to put all these things together. So regional coordination, we're seeing a lot of good elements there. So let's talk about some of the recommendations. So the first recommendation is that the RTA board, there needs to be some changes to the appointment of those board members. So one of the ways in which that could be done is through the legislative bodies making those appointments instead of the county executives. So there are some distinct benefits in utilizing this. First, the Detroit City Council, which is the legislative body for the city of Detroit, when they go to make an appointment, they will usually have a application process where people can submit their resume, submit whatever other documentation that they need that they would need to submit, and they would interview in public in front of that legislative body, and then a decision would be made as to whether they would appoint that person or appoint someone else. And so that is a similar way in which these appointments could be made, and that is different from the typical way in which a appointment is made for a by an executive or by some executive, political executive. And in that instance, it's usually, well, let me find a list of people that I think I would like, and I'll appoint them that way. So that it is that process, I think, would create better collaboration. It'll create an opportunity for more people to be in the say instead of just one person. Second recommendation is the Michigan Department Office of Passenger Transportation. They need to take a more exactive role in the administration of public transit programs around the state. And so beyond the research, this office should be more involved in being a mediator, in providing research, data, providing other kind of resources to the RTA and other similar organizations across the state to help with the process of getting the transit to work as best as it can. And so the Michigan Department, the Michigan Transit Department, and the Office of Passenger Transportation should be more active in doing that. And there are future research could explore some of the more efficient ways in which similar offices around the country have done this. So the language in PA 387 that allows a single county ability to halt the expansion of public transit services in a region creates a extremely difficult burden on the RTA. That language should be removed so that the RTA can be empowered to raise the revenue and integrate planning processes. Basically, we are talking about getting rid of the vetoes that are that each county is able to have on these major big ticket items, putting things on the ballot. And so the RTA basically is just simply not empowered, as the research, as the consideration says that it should be. It's not empowered to really exercise its extensive list of powers. And so these barriers should be removed so that the RTA can be more efficient in that area. The RTA of Southeastern Michigan should develop a public engagement plan and funding plan that incorporates the numerous successful ways the RTA of Southeastern Michigan should develop a public engagement plan and funding that incorporates the numerous successes it has had with coordinating public transit services among the different transportation providers of Southeastern Michigan. As I mentioned, the coordination has been a very bright spot, a very bright area for the RTA, and they have played a very important role in that. The problem is that no one knows about it. So, and that's the thing, because even with the fast buses, SMART would have never had the idea to do those SMART buses without the RTA taking the lead on getting the Reflex buses. And so you see a very successful fast buses that are being used because the RTA said, hey, we want to do these Reflex buses. And so, that's one thing. The fare cards, I see people getting on and off the bus all the time using their phones, transferring from one system to the other, using using the the dart passes and everything like that, that's a success. And the RTA should talk about that and talk about that success. They should talk about the successes they've had in other areas. Talk about what their future plans have been. That is going to create more confidence in the public that the RTA is doing the things that it needs to do. And when another effort is made to pursue additional funding, that you would have is that you would help to create more confidence in the voters that that money would be spent in a very good way. So that is something that that is a message that they need to talk about, but they also have to fund it as well. So they need to have a funding plan in that area as well. So that is the end of our presentation. I would like to thank all of you for your kind attention on this. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section of this video. I'll be more than happy to answer them as soon as I can. Thank you and have a good day.